So my presentation, like the initial part of my presentation, will be about how the current gendered epistemologies are insufficient to understand the complicated lives of Muslim women. And in the later part, I'll be I'm thinking about the possibilities of an intersectional perspective. uh, how can it be used to understand a faith-centered or the faith-centered lives of Muslim women. So I'll be reading most of the parts of my paper. After the attacks of September 11, 2001, the images of oppressed Muslim women became connected to a mission to rescue them from their cultures. News outlets and other media sources eagerly reported on and amplified narratives about perceived oppression and inferior position of women in Muslim societies. Concurrently, many feminist activists and organizations aligned themselves with this narrative, supporting the idea that Muslim women were in need of liberation and rescue. Lila Abolugut critically examines how Western media and some feminist groups have approached the topic of Muslim women's rights and social status. It suggests that there was a kind of excitement in the way these stories were covered and promoted, potentially oversimplifying complex cultural and social issues. She points out the problematic nature of this approach, which often fails to consider the diverse experiences of Muslim women, the complexities of their societies, and the potential for misrepresentation or cultural bias in such reporting and activism. So what we call as Orientalist feminism, which is very much connected with colonial feminism, where Muslim women and Middle Eastern women in particular have been constructed as passive, oppressed, and awaiting liberation from the so-called backward aspects of their culture. This is often used as a justification for political and military interventions in Muslim majority countries, seen in campaigns such as the US invasion of Afghanistan, which was framed in part as liberating Afghan women from Taliban's oppressive rule. These approaches reflect imperialist logics by imposing Western standards of gender equality on diverse societies without adequately considering local needs, cultural practices, or the perspectives of women from these regions. Western feminist thought has often produced a simplified, one size fits all understanding of women's experiences and struggles. This approach fails to account for the diverse realities of women across different cultures, economies, and geopolitical contexts. Um, so, in order to criticize this imperialistic or white feminism, uh, I mostly draw from black feminists. So Bell Hooks observes on the origin of feminism. Feminism in the United States has never emerged from the women who are most victimized by sexist oppression. Women who are daily beaten down mentally, physically, and spiritually. Like women who are powerless to change their condition in life. Specific problems and dilemmas of leisure class white housewives were real concerns that merited consideration and change, but they were not the pressing political concerns of masses of women. Here, Bell Hooks criticizes Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mistake. Masses of women were concerned about economic survival, ethnic and racial discrimination, etc. Like a central tenet of modern feminist thought has been the assertion that all women are oppressed. This assertion implies that women share a common lot, that factors like class, race, religion, etc., do not create a diversity of experience that determines the extent to which sexism will be an oppressive force in the lives of individual women. Third world women, feminists, and women of color have criticized this perspective, arguing that it ignores crucial differences in their experiences, such as the impacts of colonialism, racism, and economic exploitation. They argue for a more nuanced intersectional approach that recognizes how factors like race, class, and geography interact with gender to shape women's lives and challenges. By attempting to deprivilege religion, that is to diminish the importance of or cast it solely as a source of oppression, these Western discourses paradoxically negate a fundamental aspect of many Muslim women's identities and lived experiences. This approach fails to recognize that many Muslim women, their religious faith is not merely an imposed constraint, but a chosen and integral part of their selfhood. By portraying the Muslim women as a uniform and oppressed other, and as she is defined primarily by her gender and framed as a victim of the patriarchal aspects of her religion, Western epistemological discourses overlook the significance of the very religion they seek to marginalize in these women's lives. These discourses fail to recognize that Islam plays a crucial role in the identities and experiences of these women they attempt to homogenize. So, intersectionality is a theoretical framework that examines how various social identities such as race, gender, class, and religion intersect to create unique experiences of oppression and privilege. This concept is particularly relevant in analyzing the experiences of Muslim women as it allows for a nuanced understanding of how their identities are shaped by multiple overlapping factors. Intersectionality provides a vital framework for understanding the multifaceted life of Muslim women. It challenges dominant feminist narratives by emphasizing the importance of diverse perspectives and experiences, thereby fostering a more inclusive dialogue that acknowledges the complexities of identity and oppression. In their normative assumptions about the autonomous subject, most feminist analysis have proven unable to make sense of religious life experiences of contemporary Muslim women. While the universalist frame portraying religion as a site of pure male domination and denying any agency to veiled women is called into question within feminist scholarship, the contradictions of the post-colonial frame, eager to take the views of subaltern women seriously and to confer them with agency and subject status, yet unable to seriously engage with their religious motivations, are insufficiently addressed. So this is where Sabah Mahmood comes into the scene. Women's involvement in conservative religions, endorsing principles of female subordination and the ideals of feminine virtues such as modesty, poses a serious challenge for feminism, or it confuses them. Now I'm just thinking aloud about these gendered epistemologies and their limitations. So, are women just gendered subjects, or what are the other social categorizations that determine women's lives? So, seeing women as just gendered subjects, an exclusive focus on the gender relations within the community conceals forms of oppression operating on majority or minority level via other social divisions such as nation, class, race, and religion. In reaction to the subordination or false consciousness thesis denying agency to veiled women, a new frame has been elaborated mainly by post-colonial scholars that underline their ability to resist or subvert Western hegemony. Feminist epistemologies, as a response to an androcentric epistemological bias, placed gender as the focal point of analysis. This gendered epistemological perspective operates within a secular feminist framework that perceives the other as predominantly a singular category, a gendered category. Within this context, a homogenized classification of third world woman is contrasted with the patriarchal Muslim male and this oppressive nature of Islam. This criticizes how knowledge production, particularly in colonial and post-colonial contexts, often fails to acknowledge the complexity of different identities. It highlights how colonial discourses, which are shaped by Western powers during and after colonialism, tend to focus on a singular understanding of oppression or inequality. In this case, the critique is directed at discourses that primarily emphasize gender inequality without considering other aspects of identity such as religion, race, or culture, particularly in the context of Muslim women. When discussions around inequality and oppression prioritize only gender, they can unintentionally erase the complexity of people's identities. In case of Muslim women, their experience of inequality is not solely due to gender, but also due to the intersection of their religious position, racial and cultural and political position. By ignoring these intersections, such discourses risk perpetuating a limited colonial and Western centric view of what oppression looks like, rather than acknowledging the diverse and nuanced realities of different women around the world. So I came across an interesting paper by Farhana Rahman where she interrogates this notion of a gendered epistemology as the only way of knowing by suggesting that a cross-cultural and intersectional set of perspectives that place the category of gender within the category of other frameworks of difference pursues a more nuanced approach that is attuned to a variety of epistemologies rather than a single unified gendered epistemology. Rahman explores the merits and limitations of a gendered epistemology by employing standpoint theory as a tool of analysis. It is interesting to note how a Western academic hegemonic approach on gendered epistemology essentializes experiences of what it means to be a woman, as non Western women's identities are seen as monolithic. A multifaceted and intersectional framework that situates the concept of gender within broader contexts of diversity adopts a sophisticated perspective that is sensitive to a range of epistemological viewpoints rather than adhering to a singular unified gendered epistemology. And a scholar called Jasmine Z. She explores the intersection of feminism, faith, and identity, particularly focusing on Muslim women. And she thinks about creating a critical faith centered space for anti racist feminisms. She critiques the dominant narratives that portray Muslim women solely as victims, needing liberation through Western ideals, arguing that such representations deny their agency and complexity. Zane emphasizes the need to recognize diverse expressions of femininity beyond Western frameworks. She highlights how Muslim women are often depicted in one dimensional manner, which overlooks their active roles in shaping their identities and resisting patriarchal interpretations of Islam. Faith centered knowledge construction can challenge dominant feminist narratives by offering alternative frameworks that prioritize the lived experiences and voices of women within religious contexts. This approach allows for a nuanced understanding of identity that resists the monolithic portrayals often found in secular feminist discourses. By centering faith based knowledge, Muslim women can articulate their own experiences and resist the sensationalized accounts that frame them as oppressed. This creates a space for diverse expression of femininity that do not conform to Western liberal ideals, thus enriching this academic narratives with varied perspectives. So this we can see different sorts of debates going on inside and outside the community. Faith-based feminists criticize their secular counterparts for addressing patriarchal power structures without adequately considering the intersecting issues of race and class. They argued that secular feminism tended to marginalize the voices of women of color and those from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, framing it as predominantly a white women's movement. According to believing women or women of faith, secular approaches often neglected racism and classism in their analysis and political goals. Additionally, there were tensions on ideological and epistemological levels as believing women questioned the differing conceptual frameworks that secular feminists used to interpret the complexities of women's lives and experiences. On the other hand, secular Muslim feminists often criticize their faith-based counterparts for not explicitly rejecting what they perceive as religious foundations of women's subordination in Islam, accusing them of complicity with patriarchal theocratic systems. On the other hand, faith-based Muslim women are often wary of secular Muslim feminists, viewing them as proponents of Western ideologies that are disconnected from indigenous feminist thought and practice. By making essentialist critiques, secular Muslim feminists risk reproducing the Orientalist rhetoric of Western imperialist feminists, who similarly portray Muslim women in a negative light. These Western feminists position themselves as the intellectual leaders, claiming that Muslim women, viewed as politically vulnerable, required guidance and instructions in the principles of Eurocentric cultural feminism. Secular Muslim feminists have often overlooked or failed to theorize the other side of the political dynamic, where Muslim women, while challenging the patriarchal and authoritarian structures within their communities, hesitate to openly express their concerns due to the pervasive racism and Islamophobia that already exists. So this is something I would, want to take a bit ahead in the discussions. Exposing sexism within their communities places these women at risk of reinforcing negative stereotypes that portray these issues as the defining characteristics of the Muslim community. Consequently, for racialized Muslim women, the systems of oppression they face, rooted in race, ethnicity, religion, and gender, are deeply interwoven and interconnected. So, the scholar that I was mentioning earlier, Zine, she proposes possibilities for an alternative faith centered epistemology that speaks to the way Muslim women who actively align with their faith see the world and their place within it. She intends the construction of a critical space in which faith centered women may articulate notions of femininity and womanhood, a space that is attentive to the role spirituality and religious commitment play in Muslim women's conceptions of selfhood and their engagements. Attempting to construct a new genealogy for women's engagement, Muslim women's engagement and praxis based on a faith-centered epistemological framework requires centering faith-based knowledge construction as a lens through which a particular reading of the world can be constructed and framed. This involves the political and discursive goal of creating a space where faith-centered voices can enter critical academic and political debates and dialogues as valid sites of knowledge and contestation. A critical faith-centered analysis provides for this level of metaphysical engagement in order to best understand how faith and spirituality continue to inform daily social life and personal development. The centrality of religious practice is imperative in understanding the realities of faith-centered Muslims. Therefore, in this way, the critical faith-centered perspective attends to the salience of faith and spirituality in framing the worldviews, beliefs, and practices of faith-centered people, and accepts this as a valid way of negotiating and understanding notions of community, selfhood, gender, identity, and political engagements and practices. So what Zine proposes, she envisions a sort of the enrichment of the feminist discourse. But I think the conception of a faith-centered epistemological framework as I consider this faith-centered epistemological framework as useful in the academic engagements that concerns Islam and Muslim women. So I'll stop here, because the time is a bit limited, and I look forward to hearing from you all as the scholars of Islamic studies. So what do you guys think about all these things? So this was more about how do we place this believing Muslim women, or how can we place these women in the academic setting, or academic narratives. Yeah, so I'll stop you.